Hi and welcome. In a previous tutorial, we explored two methods to limit scrolling in Excel. The first method hides extra rows and columns, while the second method uses VBA to restrict scrolling to a specific range. In this tutorial, we'll take it a step further and show you how to dynamically control the scroll bar based on your data. Let's start by enabling the Developer tab if it's not already visible on the ribbon. Right-click anywhere on the ribbon, choose Customize Ribbon, and then check the Developer option in the Excel Options dialog box. Once enabled, the Developer tab will appear on the ribbon. Let's first revisit how we used VBA in our previous tutorial to set a fixed scroll area. Open the VBA editor by pressing Alt F11. In the Project Explorer, find the worksheet where you want to limit the scroll area and double-click its name to open the code window. Insert the worksheet_activate event. It runs automatically whenever the worksheet is selected. Now, enter the code as shown on screen. This code restricts scrolling to the range A1 to H20. The Me keyword refers to the current worksheet, and scroll area defines the area where users can navigate. To test the code, either click the play button in the VBA editor or switch to a different sheet, and then return to the one with the code. When the sheet is activated, the worksheet_activate event triggers, executing the code and limiting scrolling to the specified range. If you want to remove the scroll restriction, simply set scroll area to an empty string. Setting scroll area to an empty string removes any limitations, restoring full scrolling access. Now let's move on to a more dynamic way to limit scrolling. We'll start with a simple and efficient approach that requires minimal code. Open the VBA editor again and remove all the code we wrote earlier for a fresh start. Next, insert a new module by clicking the Insert menu and selecting Module. This creates a new blank editor window, and you'll see a new module named Module 1 appear in the Project Explorer. Now let's start writing our code. First, create a subroutine named Limit Scroll and insert the code shown on screen. The Used Range property refers to the range of cells that contain data, starting from the first used cell to the last. By assigning Used Range address to scroll area, we dynamically restrict scrolling to only the area where data exists. This way, as data grows or shrinks, the scrollable area updates accordingly. Click the play button to run the subroutine, then close the VBA editor. Now try scrolling. The window won't move beyond the data range. Try selecting empty cells outside the data area. You can't. The scroll is now limited to the used range. To remove this restriction, let's create another subroutine named Reset Scroll. Insert the code shown on screen. As we mentioned earlier, setting scroll area to an empty string removes all scroll limitations, restoring full navigation. Click the play button to run the Reset Scroll subroutine, then close the VBA editor. Now, try scrolling the Excel window or selecting empty cells. You'll see that the Reset Scroll subroutine has successfully removed the scrolling restrictions, allowing unrestricted movement across the worksheet. Now, you can easily limit or remove scrolling restrictions using the Macros dialog box. Run the Limit Scroll to apply the scroll limit. Test it out. You'll notice that you can no longer scroll the window or select any empty cells outside the data range. Now, open the Macros dialog box again, and this time run Reset Scroll. You'll see that the restriction is removed. Now you can scroll freely and select any cell without any limitations. To make this process more convenient and interactive, let's add buttons to limit or remove scrolling restrictions. Go to the Developer tab, click Insert in the Controls group, and choose a button from Form Controls. Draw the button on the sheet, and when the Assign Macro dialog box appears, select Limit Scroll and click OK. Rename the button to Limit Scrolling. Now, whenever you press this button, scrolling will be restricted to the data range. Try it, and you'll see that you can't scroll or select any empty cells. Now, insert another button and assign it the Reset Scroll macro. Clicking this button will remove the scroll restriction, restoring normal navigation. With just two buttons and minimal code, you can easily toggle scrolling limits. But we're not stopping here. If you prefer an even more dynamic approach, without using buttons, where Excel automatically detects when you need to enter more data, delete these buttons and open the VBA editor again. Let's modify the Limit Scroll subroutine by updating its parameter, as shown on the screen. This change allows the subroutine to receive a copy of a reference to a worksheet and modify its scroll area property. Replace Active Sheet with SH in the subroutine. Instead of directly modifying the active sheet, the subroutine now takes a worksheet object sh as a parameter. This makes it more flexible, as we can call limit scroll for any worksheet by passing it as an argument. For example, if we want to limit the scroll area on Sheet 1 dynamically, our goal is to ensure that the scrollable range expands as new data is added and contracts when data is deleted. To achieve this, we use the worksheet_change event, as shown on the screen. The worksheet_change event triggers automatically whenever a change occurs in the worksheet, whether data is inserted, modified, or deleted. When this happens, the event calls the limit scroll subroutine, passing active sheet as the argument. The limit scroll subroutine then updates the scroll area property dynamically based on the used range of the sheet, ensuring that users can only scroll within the active data range. This makes the scroll area adapt to changes in real time without manual intervention. As you can see on the screen, we can freely scroll through the worksheet. Now, let's enter a value into any cell and press enter. When we do this, the worksheet_change event is triggered, which calls the limit scroll subroutine. The subroutine then restricts the scroll area to the current data range, preventing us from scrolling or selecting any cells beyond this range. However, while the code successfully limits the scroll area, it also prevents us from adding new data beyond the current range, meaning we can't expand our data beyond the used range without manually running the reset scroll macro. To make this process fully dynamic, so the scroll area updates automatically without needing to run the reset scroll macro, let's open the VBA editor again and modify the limit scroll subroutine as shown on the screen. First, we declare 3 variables: last row and last call to store the last row and last column of the used range, last cell to hold the bottom right cell reference for defining the scroll area. Next, we determine the last used row and add 2 to its value. Then, we do the same for the last used column. This ensures that the scroll area extends beyond the current data range, providing extra space for new entries. We then set last cell as the bottom right boundary of the scroll area. Finally, we update the scroll area property of the worksheet, limiting it from cell A1 to last cell. This dynamically restricts the scrolling area while still allowing some flexibility for data expansion. Now, whenever data is added or removed, the limit scroll subroutine ensures that the scroll area always leaves room for 2 additional rows and columns. This means we don't need to manually reset the scroll area every time we add new data. The advantage of this approach is that when we enter data in a blank row or column, the scroll area automatically expands after the entry, ensuring a seamless experience. Now, go back to the Excel sheet and enter some data. You'll notice that 2 extra rows and columns are available for data entry. When you enter data in any of these cells, the used range automatically extends, allowing you to continue adding more data. As you keep entering data, the scroll area expands dynamically. This way, you get the benefit of both limited scrolling and flexible data entry, ensuring that the scroll area adjusts automatically while still maintaining control over where users can navigate. Now, try removing data from the last few columns and rows. As you delete the data, you'll notice the scroll area shrinking dynamically, contracting to match the updated used range. This means the worksheet always keeps the scroll area optimized based on the actual data present. To visualize how the scroll area is working, let's highlight it with a light yellow background. First, go back to the VBA editor and enter this line at the top of the limit scroll subroutine. This will reset the entire sheet's background color to its default, usually white. Next, before the last line, add another code line as shown on the screen. This will highlight the scrolling range with a light yellow background, while keeping the rest of the worksheet in its default state. Now, go back to Excel, try adding and removing data, and see how the highlighted area expands and contracts dynamically as the scroll area adjusts. These 2 lines of code are only for demonstration purposes. They help us visually understand how our code is working. Once you're confident about the functionality, you can remove these lines to prevent any unnecessary formatting in your workbook. To test if the scroll limit persists after reopening the workbook, first, save and close your workbook, then reopen it. Now, try scrolling. You'll notice that you can freely navigate the entire sheet. Next, enter some data in any cell. You'll see that there are no restrictions, meaning our code has not executed after reopening the workbook. However, as soon as you modify or enter new data, the scroll limit is instantly applied. This happens because we're using the worksheet_change event, which only triggers when we add, edit, or delete data inside the sheet. To ensure the scroll limit is applied automatically when the workbook opens, we need to run the VBA code as soon as the workbook is loaded. This can be achieved using the workbook_open event. The workbook_open event runs automatically whenever the workbook is opened, making it the perfect solution to apply our limit scroll subroutine without waiting for user input. Let's open the VBA editor, double-click the This Workbook module in the Project Explorer, and in the code window, insert the workbook_open event. Inside this event, call the limit scroll subroutine, passing sheet 1, or the sheet you want to limit scroll. Now, save and reopen the workbook. This time, you'll see that the scroll limit is already applied as soon as the workbook loads. Now you've seen how we can dynamically control the scroll area in Excel while still allowing data expansion. The VBA code automatically adjusts the scroll limit as we add or remove data, ensuring a balance between navigation control and flexibility. If you found this tutorial helpful, please like, share, and subscribe for more Excel tips and automation tricks. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.